Hey, I bring you greetings from San Diego, and Emperor Newsom says to say hi. Uh, you know, the word unprecedented is, would you agree with me it's overused? It is not overused in this season we're in right now. I mean, I've had kind of the fortune of a giftedness to mentally model things over the years and kind of make some pretty accurate guesses about where things were headed, unintended consequences, whatever. I get asked that about this thing, and I always have the same answer. I have no idea. We're all kind of Lewis and Clark as we're trying to find our way through this and doing the best we can. I want to give you some great advice that the people who are right most of the time change their mind a lot. So if you'll just remember that in this, be careful to have initiatives or have that light bulb go on and tell your church, your congregation, whatever it would be, you've got it all figured out. This is what we're going to do because things keep changing. Like I said, it's like Lewis and Clark. We're all headed to the coast, and along the way, we're going to get there. We're going to get there at a different pace in different ways and find all kinds of different obstacles. In fact, for some of us, we're going to find out there is no Northwest Passage. But with the help of Jesus, we're going to get there anyway. And we have the privilege. The Lord didn't put us here by mistake at this time in this place. And he said, nah, this is a team I want in your church doing your things in this particular time, no matter how much we have a little bit of like, what's up with that? And as I said, in California, probably a bunch of you saw or read. How many of you here have read like our new regulations for Thanksgiving? Help me out. Okay, for those of you who didn't, with Thanksgiving coming up, here's what I can do. I can have 3 family units. So my wife and I, and of our 3 kids, I get to pick 2 of them to come. So one of them is not allowed to come. We will have Thanksgiving outdoors, 6 feet apart in all directions. We cannot have any family style serving. We need to serve every portion in its own styrofoam box. And they are allowed to use the restroom in the house as long as we have properly sanitized it. So I think we're skipping Thanksgiving or we're violating the rules, one of the two, right? But these are the weird environments we find ourselves in. And as much as we complain about it or joke about it wherever you are in it, the truth of the matter is ministry always has its hard and difficult and uncharted courses that we go through. And I want to share today a little bit on what I call lead like a shepherd. You want to go deeper in it? Actually, one of my books, not one of my good ones, Lynn, but is called Lead Like a Shepherd. And takes this idea and goes all the deeper. And it comes from 1 Peter chapter 5. So you got a Bible, I want to encourage you to get there. We're going to just look at a few verses of what does it mean to lead like a shepherd. But I want to remind you the context in which Peter is writing this. He's writing this in a context in which the Roman government now is no longer just tolerating these Christians, but they are persecuting these Christians. So it's no longer the Jewish religious establishment, like in much of the book of Acts. It's actually the Roman government. And he's got to tell his people, hey, give honor where honor is due, and remind them, because it is not as easy time and a place to be a Christian and give any honor to those that are in authority. Do not count it strange when you go through fiery trials. This is what everybody goes through. That's in this same book. And when he comes to chapter 5, he what we call chapter 5, aren't you glad the monks put all those little indexes in there? A little sidebar for all of you who teach, though. One of the great problems is the chapter and the verses, because we tend to look at the tree and often miss the forest. And the trees are in a forest for a purpose. And so I want us to remember, he's not just giving us exhortations as we look at this about how to lead well, but if we step back and see the forest, the context in which he says it all, it's within a very difficult, constantly changing time in which all the stuff you'd love to do, you can't necessarily do. And he then says to the elders among you, and there's another sidebar I want to take on this so we realize who this is to, because the word elder has morphed over time. Would you agree with me? Kind of to be an elder is to be a lead dog in some churches. It definitely means you got a very robust theology. You're part of the elite few. But I want to remind you that word is a very fluid word actually in the New Testament. The New Testament was written in what we call Koine Greek, common Greek, not the classical Greek, common Greek, the second language for many people, kind of like pidgin English in the marketplace today. So we do a weird thing often. We'll take words because Gutenberg came along and we've been able to read it carefully, mark it up, and build concordances and all that stuff. And we take a deep dive often into the etymology of a word or how it's used and stuff like that in ways that the early writers and readers of the New Testament would go, what? You know, because they didn't have all of that kind of stuff. And again, it's a second language, so they really didn't know how Aristotle used this word. You know, the guy's just like a cobbler in Corinth making shoes or whatever. And so that same thing has happened with the word elder. We've got big books on biblical eldership, but we forget it's a fluid word that just basically means oversight. It means a leader. It was sometimes used of all the older people in a small town or small village. Jesus spoke to his disciples as they were going up the mountain. He says, hey, I want you to know I'm going to be turned over and killed. And who am I going to be turned over to? The religious leaders, okay, the teachers of the law, and the elders. By that I meant just the general leaders, not this special group. Like obviously when he's writing to Titus and Timothy, he's appointing somebody. But I want you to remember this. He's not appointing the small group of elders over some big old church or even a church plant. It's a house church, right? And I don't know a lot about house churches, but I know this. They don't have governing boards, right? They just, but he's saying, okay, they're meeting and doing all this stuff, but I want you to go back through Timothy here in Ephesus, and I want you to see them, and you know what? I want you to appoint a leader, a presbyteros, an overseer. Gutenberg hasn't come along, so they don't have this incredibly robust theology and all the training and things we think. It's just a spiritual leader. And by the way, these are the minimal qualifications. They can't have a glaring weakness. Above reproach is a phrase that we're familiar with. And then in Timothy and Titus, he gives examples of that. In fact, it's not an engineering checklist because the two lists are different. So he either goofed up or he's just saying, by the way, this is what I mean to be above reproach. They can't be the kind of person who says, man, they love God, but. Man, they're really gifted, but. No glaring weakness. And I say this because that means this exhortation, when he writes as a fellow elder, is not just for lead pastors. It's not just for the very top leaders. It's a person who oversees any area of ministry, would be a presbyteros. In your church, you've appointed them and said, I'm putting you as an overseer above this. And so certainly there's different levels of it, but we need to think through this passage, not in terms of those at the top of the food chain, but anybody that's at the top of any food chain in ministry. Does that make sense to you? And again, it's maybe some of you have heard me say this before. We're a lot like fish in the water. You ask the fish, how's the water? It goes, what water? Because that's all it's ever known. And so we often do that with parts of Scripture. We forget the context historically and relationally that these things were written in. So with that little bit of a background, to see that leading like a shepherd is not just for what we call shepherds today, but any of us who want to lead in ministry. Let's take a look at these few verses. And if you're a note taker, I'm going to tell you right at the top end, these are the four things that we're going to look at. And we'll dive deepest in the first one. So those of you who watch your clock, don't get too nervous when I spend a little more time on that one. But here they are. The first one is we need to think like a shepherd. Think like a shepherd. 1 Peter 5, verses 1 and 2. To the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow presbyteros, overseer, leader, and witness of Christ's sufferings, who will also share in the glory to be revealed. Be what? Talk to me. Help me out. Be what? Shepherds. So we've got to think. If we're going to lead like a shepherd, we've got to understand how shepherds think, lead, and what they do. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them. Then he goes to the second thing, which is serve with enthusiasm. Serve with enthusiasm, not begrudgingly. It's allergies, folks. Don't worry, okay. It is, you know, you used to sneeze and people would say, God bless you. It's not what they say anymore, is it? I'm on a plane. I've always had allergies. So I just tell people I'm a smoker and they get off me. So anyway, here we go. Serve with enthusiasm. 1 Peter 5:2. Be shepherds of God's flocks under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be, not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve. Third, think like a shepherd, serve with enthusiasm, and lead by example. Verse 3, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And then number 4, if you're going to lead well, lead like a shepherd, you're going to lead with a long-range perspective. And when the chief shepherd appears, not now, when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. So let me take these 4 simple things he tells us to do. You got to lead like a shepherd. I like to call it think like a shepherd so that I can do that. You've got to serve with enthusiasm. You got to lead by example. And we need to have a long-range perspective. So let's flesh that out. Now, when Peter wrote that, lead like a shepherd meant something to them. It was an agrarian culture and a domestic culture as well. So they were raising animals. So they knew shepherds. Now, I don't know about you, but all I ever knew about sheep and shepherds was from taking my kids to the county fair. You know, and they had this little booth that you'd go through, and, oh, I guess those are sheep and whatever it would be. But they not only saw it day in and day out, they also knew that the Lord, even though shepherds were low on the totem pole, he said, I am your shepherd. They knew that Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. And they also knew one of the most famous Psalms, Psalm 23. So many of you even got to memorize, so you don't even probably have to turn over there. But let's just think what we can know about shepherds and how they respond from the 23rd Psalm and from Jesus' words, I am the good shepherd, and the Lord in the Old Testament calling himself the shepherd of Israel. And the leaders, spiritual leaders he put there. So first of all, it's this. It's all about the sheep, not the shepherd, if we're going to think like a shepherd. You know, cowboys drive the cattle. Shepherds lead them. Cowboys brand them. Shepherds know them by name. It's a very different thing. And these are the words of Jesus. Well, let me step back first and say it this way. A shepherd asks, what do the sheep need? A hireling says, what's in it for me? If I'm going to think like a shepherd, I've got to get rid of the ministry career model that has so brought itself into our churches today. You know, I'm in a staff level. It's like, okay, what's in it for me? No, our number one question has to be, what do the sheep need? There's a time and a place for self-care. I'm not talking about having no self-care and just letting everybody run over you. But I think that pendulum has swung way too far. We love to preach about, you know, being a servant leader as long as no one treats us like a servant leader, you know. That's like, well, as long as you know I'm Pastor Larry setting up chairs, that's cool. But if you go ask me to get you something, it's like, dude, I'm just pretending, you know, like this is this is just a gig. Like you're treating me like a servant, right? And then we get upset, right? When your church is overly demanding of you, the ministry you're over is overly demanding of you. You've worked your butt off to set up an event or something, your youth staff, children's staff, or whatever, and all the people who RSVP didn't show up. If you're a servant, you just go, oh, crud, that was a bad day. But if you're a prima donna, you get mad at them. Why? Because we think they're here to serve us. We don't understand it's about them. Jesus put it this way in John 10, 11 to 13. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Lays down his time, lays down his energy, lays down his ego, lays down his career for the sheep. Oh, the hired hand, they're really different. The hired hand is not the shepherd, and he doesn't own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. The wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The ram runs away for one simple reason, because he's a hired hand, and he doesn't really care about the sheep. I was with a friend the other day who was given a little devotional on a mentoring thing we were doing with a bunch of young pastors, and he pointed out something I hadn't seen before. Maybe you have. But it was in Jeremiah where the Lord says that he gives shepherds to Israel. And he kind of turned that, he gives a flock to shepherds, is how we think of it. But that's not what it is. If you're a leader, God didn't give you a flock. He gave you to the flock. See that difference? We talk about my flock, my this, my that, and we kind of have this ownership of it because we think, I'm all committed to you, Lord. I'm going to do the really best. Now you give me a flock. And by the way, give me a flock that will pay me well. Give me a flock that will appreciate me. Give me a flock that will not treat me like a servant leader. And he says, no, you got it all wrong. This is my flock, and I'm just grabbing you and giving you to them for a while. And when I'm done with you, it's next, 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 next. And I believe when we can really understand that servant leadership isn't a concept. It's not even called servant leadership by Jesus. It's called be a servant and then be a slave if you want to be number one. The word leadership isn't in that. We've just coined that phrase. And if we get down the idea that we lay down our life for the sheep, not they're here to help us be fulfilled, I think a lot of things would be different. It's always bothered me that most pastoral transitions are always up to a bigger platform and a bigger salary. And when they're not, it's because the last place was hell. And I'm just waiting for sometimes it's like, no, the Lord's just called me here. Because there's a flock, and he said, no, I need you over there. I love when you read, we're teaching through the book of Acts right now, going through at the speed of an arthritic snail. We're in week 40 in chapter 19. But what I love about the book of Acts is how God just uses, at one point, Barnabas and Paul and the different things. It's like, no, I need you to go over here. Nope, I need you to go. It wasn't about them. It was about the body. And the Lord just gave different assignments at different times because they needed it. It's all about the sheep, not the shepherd. But there's something else special about a shepherd, a real shepherd. A shepherd is willing to be misunderstood. And I think right now, that's especially those of you that are lead pastors and in any way tried to say anything about the social issues that have gone on, you got a lot of scars right now. Sidebar, I sometimes do a talk called the Switzerland Principle, where I teach people, no, it's better to say nothing and have everybody annoyed at you than say something and have a whole bunch of people who won't listen to you anymore. And what has happened is all across this nation, friends of mine, the coaching, the mentoring things, whatever, virtually every one of them is so frustrated right now because they stepped out and said something that was absolutely true, probably said it incredibly wisely, and then their church is split like crazy over it. And in fact, you can have the same message right now. How many of you can join me and Chris Brown over at North Coast Church where you do the same message and you get somebody all ticked off from the right and all ticked off from the left over the same sentence? It's like, what's up with this? And I think for many of us, those are the times we just want to quit. Like, I mean, I can't do anything right. You're flaming off some social media statement or sending some flaming email, having no idea that you would have never said that to the person's face, and completely wrong, jumping to conclusions because you heard the first three words of a sentence and filled in the whole rest of the paragraph. That's just happening. That's part of it. But you know what a shepherd does? They go, that's part of leadership, being misunderstood. Think with me now the 23rd Psalm. Remember I told you a few minutes ago we were going to go there. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, okay? He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters, and it goes on. And I've always kind of pictured, he leads me beside, the green pastures and the quiet waters, that is a picture of the Lord's goodness. He's just got me in this just wonderful, tranquil place where I'm on a hammock reading a book in the green pastures and the little water there. Like, oh, you're so good, God. That's because I don't know diddly about shepherds. The shepherds had to lead the sheep as the seasons changed up and down the various plateaus where the grass was and back down the hilly country over there. And I didn't catch till I took a deep dive in this. He makes me lie down in green pastures. See, all I saw was green pastures. You know what the most important word is there? Say it. Makes me. Think about that. Have you ever had to make somebody do what they wanted to do? No. I did not have to make my kids fight with one another. I did not have to make them not go to bed. I did not have to make them eat ice cream. I had to make them eat vegetables. I had to make them go to bed. I had to make them brush their teeth. I had to make, the list goes on. And you know what? Every time Nancy and I made them do something, they said, "Oh, thank you, wise and loving father and mother. We so get that this is for our own good." No, my kids did what some of your kids are doing right now. They melted down. They didn't say it out loud, but, like disappear was going through their head, right? And so as a leader, we've got to understand that there is a time and a place that we are going to have to make people do things they don't want, and you will not be appreciated, understood, or liked when you do that. But if you're not willing to make them lie down and you're going to let them keep going when they want to go, they're going to starve to death. Now, what I love sometimes in Scripture, I have two sides of the coin, because the very next statement, when we step back and get it, is the other side of the coin. Because if I'm going to be a good shepherd, I'm not going to try to please everybody. I'm going to let some divine subtraction take place as the Lord decides to thin the herd. I'm going to make them lie down, but here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to be an angry shepherd because they won't do what I say. And I'm not going to be a high demand shepherd that says, "Man, you got to be some super saint or I don't want anything to do with you." Because I'm also, along with being willing to misunderstand and make them lie down in green pastures, I'm going to adapt to their weaknesses and fears. Because that's exactly what leading by quiet waters is. Many of you know sheep are afraid of running water. A little bit because of their wool and getting, a whole bunch of reasons. But it's like, dadgummit, I'm right here. It's a little tiny stinking stream. I've got my little hooky thing. It's like, I'm not going to let you drown. Drink. They won't. So he's got to go. The shepherd back then had to go and find out where the water was dammed up and quiet. Adapting to an irrational fear, a weakness, if you will, in the moment, because it's the only way the sheep would drink. And sometimes they had to dam up the water themselves. Now, I want to tell you, in my flesh, here's what I do. I do like, you did with your kids when they were little. It's like, you'll get thirsty enough, you'll drink. But that's not what a shepherd does. A shepherd is not mad at the fears, not mad at the weakness, not mad at the immaturity, not mad at the not yet ready. A shepherd adapts to that. And the irony is, by the way, in ministry, especially from those who love to speak about ministry but made enough money writing books they don't have to do ministry anymore, I'll leave it at that, they will criticize you for acquiescing to the people, for doing this or that. It's like, man, you're lowering the bar. Hey, folks, Jesus came to lower the bar. It was the Pharisees who kept trying to raise it back up. In one of my books, I talk about Joseph of Arimathea, a secret disciple who stood by while Jesus was turned over as a blasphemer, beaten and spitting on, and everybody had the impression all 71 people in the Sanhedrin were for that. He was in the room, a prominent member in the room, and didn't say a word. And John tells us why. Because he was afraid of his fellow Jewish leaders, afraid of what he'd lose. So we look at that person today and say, spit you out of the Lord's mouth. You're worse than lukewarm. Like, do you know he's twice called a disciple? Not yet ready disciple, sucky disciple, grant you that all day long. But when all those great disciples who left everything that we kind of want to preach about and say this is what it means to follow Jesus, where were they? They were all hidden. They were all ran for the hills. I mean, John the Baptist's disciples at least had, the guts to come back and get his body after it was beheaded, but Jesus, they were all gone. And then this not yet ready, absolute loser disciple, none of us would ever want to say is in my church, man, they're a Christian, but they're trying to be a secret one because they're afraid it'll cost them something. As Luke says, boldly steps forward. Fulfills an amazing prophecy in Isaiah about how the Lord would die in one way but be buried in a rich man. I mean, all these things that God was doing, we had no idea. And they're in our church. But some of us won't dam up the water. Some of us say, no, you've got to grow to the point where you realize I'm here, it's all okay. We will not make the compromises to lower the bar and make it easier because we think we're compromising the gospel. No, we're living out the gospel. We're doing what Jesus did. He did not come to make it harder to come into God's family. He came to make it easier, and that's exactly why the Pharisees of that day hated him, because they had worked so hard to get over the man-made bars that once they were in, they didn't want those bars lowered and let the riffraff in. But God has always loved the riffraff. That's what he came for. And once he cleans up our act, sometimes we forget that. And we take it quite different. Willing to meet in all of those weaknesses and figure out how can we adapt. In this time, how can we adapt to be able to reach the people that we need to reach? Some of us are very frustrated right now because there's a whole group of people who've decided that instead of going to church anywhere, they like to go to church in their underwear. And as we figured out how to do online better, they're going to do that. And I'm just amazed how many people I hear, they're almost angry. You got Paul saying, all things to all people, that I might reach some. This next week I'm preaching on Acts 19 in Ephesians, where, there's a whole bunch of people, he calls them disciples, and they don't even know that there's a Holy Spirit yet. They've only been baptized in John's baptism. He's not like you losers. He's like grabbing them and going, man, let's get on with this thing. So on one side, we need the guts to be strong, but we don't go over to meanness. We have loving, kind strength. And there's one place we all have done it if you've been blessed to be a father or a mother. It's with our kids, right? Especially when they're little. You ever had your kids go out and help you with yard work? Help? Yeah, right. You ever had your kids help you clean up the house or whatever? Help? Yeah, right. But you adapt to their weaknesses. You meet them in their moment. You put whatever it is you got to put around the food. That's what we've got to think about if we're going to think like a shepherd. Now, I told you I was going to spend most of the time on that one because to me, that's the most eye-opening, profound thing in there. But I want to take a few minutes and carry the rest of these ones out that he talks about. So let's talk about what's it mean to serve with enthusiasm. That means I'm going to be enthusiastic when I'm misunderstood. That means I'm going to be enthusiastic when I'm having to make them lie down, or I'm having to adapt things and dam up water when this running water is not only right here, it's actually better for you than the still water. Serve with enthusiasm, watching over them not because you must, but because you're willing as God wants you to be, not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve. Here's something I would encourage you to have in your life. The no complaining rule when it comes to vocational ministry. The no complaining rule. One of the rules Nance and I had for our family is my kids would tell you they never, ever heard me complain about being in vocational ministry. Ever. Because that's one of the things we wrote down. Because if I'm going to complain and I'm doing it begrudgingly, I need to quit. Because God, to be in vocational ministry, here's the thing. The moment you step over the line to follow Jesus, you are in ministry, right? It's called the priesthood of believers. Vocational ministry is not mandatory. Discipleship is, but leadership isn't. It's a choice. If you want to sit at my right or second, or left hand. Not you should. If you want to be a presbyteros, overseer, well, this is what you got to do. It doesn't say everybody has to be. Everybody should. Everybody needs to be. So the very fact that we are in a vocational ministry type of role now, or in a leadership role, it's because God has gifted us to it. He's called us to it. And then he says, if you want to do it. That's profoundly important. I always tell people when they start griping to me about how hard ministry is, vocational ministry and all of this stuff, I say, quit. I mean, I spent 40 years being a pastor at North Coast Church, but I could have spent those 40 years being a plumber, and Jesus would have loved me just as much. And my gifts of teaching and discipleship I would have used. In fact, the only reason I'm in vocational ministry is because actually I used to, on my free time, when I was going to college, I had 2 nights where I wasn't working in the grocery store. I worked a night crew area. I was a journeyman retail clerk there. And on the 2 nights I was free, I taught Bible studies. And then somebody came along and said, hey, if you will throw some like fun social events and teach Bible studies, we will pay you and call you a youth pastor. I said, excuse me? Like, you're gonna pay me what I did in my free time? Yeah. Folks, you think COVID is hard and how hard it is to be a pastor? Go get a real job and see how hard it is to have a small store, to have I mean, I can go on and on. In fact, when I hear people, you ever hear this thing like, oh, ministry, professional ministry, it's the hardest thing ever. Oh, Satan's after it. Yeah, I've heard all that stuff. I remember I went to a conference, heard that, and came home and told that to my board. I just need some extra prayer. This is the hardest job in the world. And I'm waxing on eloquent as a 32-year-old, know everything. And then one of the guys, we were meeting in a house, one of my elders got up and went like this. And I was like, I knew instantly. You ever have those moments where you know everything in a second? I know, number one, I'm being an idiot. Number two, he's going to kill me. Because he was a guy who'd gone through 3 tours of duty in Vietnam. And I'm sitting there going, oh, it's a tough job. Like, people post mean things about me. Like, some people stop giving money and our budget. It's like, get a real job. We need to be enthusiastic. It doesn't mean we're not real. Hey, this was a hard day. It doesn't mean there's not a time. Paul was depressed. He talked about it. And he only got out of his depression not memorizing Old Testament verses or the work of the Spirit. It was because Titus came and said, hey, all those things you're worried about, they're all good. You ever seen that passage in Corinthians? So, I mean, I'm not saying let's not be real, but I'm just going, come on, if we're going to be like a shepherd, we can't complain about the greatest privilege, the dream that we once had. We've got to embrace it. The no complaining rule. If you don't want to pick up poop, don't get a dog. Enough said. If I'm leading so that I get, I'm not being a servant. I'm being an investor. Third one here is lead by example. I think one of the most powerful things you can ever do if you want to be a powerful leader is live your theology, don't teach your theology. I'm amazed how many times we teach one thing, but in a real life we live something else. We teach the sovereignty of God. We whine about the sovereignty of God, like, where are you, God? We teach about the importance of forgiveness as long as you haven't hurt me too badly. I mean, they're just on and on. Because here's the thing as a leader, you will get what you are. In Luke chapter, the passage here, not lording it over those entrusted you, but being examples to the flock. And in the passage here, Luke 6, 39 to 40, everyone when fully trained will be like their teacher. How many of you are right now or once were a youth pastor? Help me out, raise your hands. Okay, good portion of you. Did you notice, or have you noticed what I noticed? Because that's what I did before I went to North Coast Church. So from 20 to 28, I was a youth pastor at 2 large churches. And we had going and blowing programs. By the grace of God, they were the largest programs in the history of that church. I thought I was really something special. And then about 10 years later, here's what I realized. the majority of kids that were in those programs were much more like, 10 years later, much more like their family of origin than they were in our youth group. Now, the Spirit of God would step, but what happens is character is caught far more than it's taught. And there's even an unseen realm in which we get what we are. And, oh yeah, God might use me as a fraud in part of my life or whatever, but it's amazing how it shows up. One of the advantages of this kind of gray hair and being around a long time is you've seen the movie enough times. It's kind of like I walk in on my wife watching a Hallmark movie and I can tell her who's going to marry who. It's like you've seen it enough times, this is it. Well, I've seen that sometimes in life. And what I've seen is often it's not right away, but what we are is what we get eventually. It just shows up. It shows up in the raising of our kids. Even one of the things that's weird is over the years I've learned even secrets that the kids don't know. As Scripture says, those sins are visited often upon a second and third generation. You can't be an angry person and then be upset that your congregation is angry at you. We're going to get what we are. And that's why the Bible teaches us to start with a mirror, not binoculars. It's amazing how we grab the Bible and go, hey, here's a verse. Let's find all the people who don't get it right. Instead of here's a verse, let's use it as a mirror and see where I don't get it right. And the last would be in verse 4. When the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. Wise leaders know that the reward comes later. But when I find myself frustrated, it's because the reward hasn't come soon enough. Always. Oh, I teach about David and how he was anointed as a king, but waited until God lifted him up as a king and had that chance to even kill Saul and didn't do it. But boy, when I'm in that zone waiting for Saul to be gone, it's a lot harder. I can preach about Moses having to live in the wilderness for 40 years, not because God needed him to become a leader, but because he stepped forward to deliver the people 40 years too early. And I don't know about you, given the choice of spending my 40 years in the palace or 40 years in the wilderness, I don't even have to pray about that choice. Oh, I can do that, but, actually waiting and not talking about waiting gets really hard. But the truth of the matter is, our reward for what we're doing now is not, Lord, where is it now? It does not come till later. And I want you to see in that passage when later is. We will receive our crown of glory when the what? Talk to me. Help me. What happens? The who? Chief shepherd what? Appears. Has he done that yet? No. Peter's in heaven, he still hasn't got his reward. And we know, we can write books and speculate about heaven. We're not told very much, but I do know there's like some people whining in heaven right now. You realize, how long, O Lord, until you avenge? Remember that passage? And it's when he comes back, all the tears are wiped away. I mean, I don't get it all. I'm not going to try to explain, heaven or the second coming. I'm on the welcoming committee, not the programming committee. But I do know this, that when I think my reward is even in this lifetime, I've got it all wrong. I'm trying to live in the front end of Hebrews 11 instead of verses 35 to 40. Those people had to run around sawn in two or run around and live in caves, drive old beater cars. And they too were commended for their faith. And then it says this weird thing we often don't catch. None of them, the front end ones who got the victories, or the ones who lived in seeming defeat, none of them received the promise because it was pushed back so that we could all share it together. Understand the context because it sounds crass, but I've got a transactional deal with the Lord. He's made me promises. If I will do this, this is what will happen. And he's going to come through on everything he said. There is no way I'm ever going to give more than I'm going to get. But when I look for it right now, when I'm saying, God, you're not upholding your part of the bargain in the last decade or this lifetime, I don't understand the bargain. Because the great gift is, it is finished. You, an enemy, have been turned into a son, a joint heir of everything that belongs to Jesus. And just cool your jets. It will all be yours. Thinking like a shepherd, I believe that profoundly can impact our ministry. And it's my encouragement to you. Not a shepherd in some church play where you're wearing dad's robe, but a real shepherd. Misunderstood, but doing the job anyway. Y'all do realize, probably you've heard it at Christmas, shepherds were not, you were not excited because your daughter was going to marry a shepherd, let's put it that way. They weren't even allowed to testify in a court of law, which is why there's such a big deal about appearing to the shepherds. You know, it's a quaint Christmas story to us. It's like that's the last people, not only we would expect God to appear to, but the last people we'd expect him to say, hey, by the way, you go tell them what you saw and they'll all believe you. Right. And then he says, by the way, that's what those of you who want to follow me, those of you who want to be in my inner circle, those of you who want to set up my right and left, those of you who want to make a ministry impact, you got to be shepherds. May God help us to do that. Father, I'd ask you to take the things we've looked at, and I would pray this just wouldn't be a few notes we've taken, but maybe through the power and work of your Spirit from the inside out, you would let each of us know if there's one of these things that has our name on it. That next step of growth, that next step of being transformed by the renewing of our minds to be all that you've called us to be and all that we will become over time as we walk with you. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Can we do some Q&A?
Whatever.
All right.
I'm here. My plane doesn't take off till this evening, so whatever you got.
Questions for Larry?
By the way, they could also be some other aspect from just the text and stuff we looked at. Yeah.
You spoke of damming the water. Can you give an example of what that could look like in today's current time?
Sure. Damming the water for, I'm going to just go back time. These are not prescriptions, descriptions, okay? But long ago for North Coast Church, it was starting a Saturday night service, and I getting now they're so common everywhere, but getting notes and stuff about, well, no, people need to take the whole Sunday off. Well, we have people who are working on Sunday. Well, they shouldn't. Well, they are. So we're going to do that. It's a Thursday night service that I've worked with so many churches for about 5 to 7 years, pushing and do that. And there's some reasons why you might not want to at North Coast because of Christmas schedule in mind. We haven't done that. We'll probably, for first time finally out of COVID, do it. But I've been a big fan of Thursday night services. Why? Because so many families are bowing the knee at the potential God, and their kid hit a home run in T-ball, so they think they might get a D1 scholarship, so they're on a traveling squad, right? And I like, well, then why would you make it Thursday night so they can continue to do that? Because I'm damming up the water so they can hear the gospel. And I don't want a church full of mature people. I want a church full of people who are coming to Jesus. You know, I mean, I kind of like the story here. You know, it can get congested getting out of our parking lot. And every now and then, you know, somebody doesn't let somebody in. They honk the horn and somebody gives them, it's not the one-way sign. Let's just put it that way. And then, well, you know, what kind of people go to North Coast? Those kind of people. You know, it's come as you are, but God forbid you stay that way. You know, like, let's not be there 20 years from now. So that would be an example, you know. Does that help you? There's
Yeah,
just
definitely.
all kinds of things we can do to make it easier instead of saying the phrase that bothers me is when we say you're compromising when you do that. You're lowering the bar. Watch for those terms. Compromising and lowering the bar, those are the terms of an accidental Pharisee. Yeah, they mean well. They're trying to help out the Lord. But the Pharisees, the real Pharisees, were accidental too. They meant well, but they didn't do so well. Good question. Anything else?
So, in the context of leading a church and the business side of it, it seems like there's a tension between leading as a shepherd and then the leadership side of the business of church. Could you give us some practical tips on how to manage that tension?
Well, first of all, business gets a bad. The church is not a business. Yes, it is. If a business means you're organized and you have bills to pay and people to hire and something to sell, we're just selling the most important eternal thing ever, but that's really what we are. We're in a transactional thing. So first of all, I long ago got rid of the idea that there's secular and non, okay? So that's all. But when it comes to the business side of that we have to learn, a shepherd had to learn business stuff too. They had to learn the route. They had to learn the season. They had to learn all the things. Instead, you couldn't, well, you're a shepherd. You love the sheep. Here's a stick, right? There was an apprenticeship. There was a learning. And as they got really large, they had shepherds under them, under shepherds, and they became ranchers. And that's frankly what the new phenomena in the last 70 years has created, what we call mega churches, because historically anything over a few hundred was massive. But what happened is transportation became ubiquitous everywhere. Should have just said the easy word. And that allowed us to go not to the closest, but to the best. And that created big box stores, big box churches, which went from 400 to 600 and now 13, 20,000. And so, of course, you have to organize then. And you can't spend money you don't have. You need to know where the money is coming from. And you'd never compromise on that side. But to me, that's still shepherding. We are shepherding when we figure out how to put an air conditioning system into a building. So that's an example of damming it up.
Another question?
Anything else?
I've heard other talks of yours or writings talking about where the church might be going. In previous conversations you've had in large group settings, you've talked about more niche markets for music and things, getting people there.
Yeah, because we live in echo chambers not only of ideas but also of taste.
And so along that same vein, on the other side of COVID, do you sense anything? I mean, we're all pioneers through this together, but do you sense anything from your experience moving forward how the church might make some adjustments on the other side of COVID?
Okay. There's a couple of things I see clearly and a whole bunch I have no idea, like I said at the beginning. What I do see clearly is pre-COVID, and this is more for your larger churches and smaller. I don't mean massive, but large enough you had a website that you put a sermon on. Pre-COVID, we were Macy's with a website. The website was designed to drive traffic to the store. Okay? Even the best of us, we are a very large church, as I think most of you know, and, have that kind of national, international presence, but still we were Macy's with a website. During COVID, even people who philosophically didn't want online all made a sudden shift, right? Oh, revelation. And what all of us did is we began to realize we can't be Macy's with a website where it's brochureware designed to get you to check us out and then come to church. That it has to be like Target, like Home Depot, like Walmart, agnostic about how the sale takes place. And I believe going forward as we come out of that, those are the churches that are going to make the biggest difference. Those that try to drive everything back to the building are going to miss out. So both of those need to be first class. Not the idea is move you over. So that's one thing coming out that I expect. I also expect that the echo chambers are not going to get smaller. The reason we have such a polarized culture right now is not the political figures. It's been going on forever, and it started with FM radio, cable television, Spotify. You just live in your own little world. MSNBC or Fox News, whatever it would be, and then all the social algorithms drive you more to what you like, away from what you don't like. So it's our personal choice driven by that. And here's what, it's not going to change. Most of us hate the echo chamber world. Do you agree? That we can't talk anymore because we use the same words, different dictionary? Social justice, Black Lives Matter. I mean, I can say all kinds of phrases, and everybody reacts out of their definition, having no idea which one I'm using or which one somebody else is. Whatever it would be. That's where we live in. Here's why it's not going to go away. Because none of us are willing to give up choices. I'm old enough, I remember when there were only 3 networks and you had to watch it live. There were only 2, growing up, 2 AM radio stations that played any music worth listening to. I don't want to go back there. I've got Sirius FM everywhere I drive. I've got, Echo Play, whatever it is I want it to play. And so if I'm not willing to go back to a world of no choices, then guess what's going to be here forever? The balkanized, broken, mosaic culture. And we're like a country that has 4 different languages being spoken. Every now and then after war or something, you get that weird mix. And they don't mix because they speak different languages. You with me on this? So what we've got to do is figure a way to do ministry in that environment. And one of the keys, some of you have heard me talk about this, I think at a Vision Arizona a thing I did, is that means we need to work together with the other churches near us more than we ever have in the past. We can't define a heart for the kingdom as being as long as you're overseas or 40 minutes away. It's now got to be across the street. Because there is no longer any church that can reach its community. You can only reach your niches. And that church next across the street, we better start helping now. Lynn, where are you, Lynn? Or did you leave? Okay, Lynn, he gives me nice introductions and then leaves. No, this time he didn't. But Lynn, we were talking right on the front end about, I don't think it's a problem when a church grows old. We rip on that church. Oh, it's just a bunch of old people. It's like, great. You're probably not going to reach the young generation. Let your stinking church grow old. It's just a building. It's just a 503c1. Just make sure the people who leave go somewhere else because you're a franchise. And if you have that mindset, guess what? When you grow old, it's okay if you grow old if you're not angry at the wildfire across the street that the Lord is raising up, right? He doesn't mind a church that's kind of monolithic. He just doesn't want it to think we're the holy huddle and the ones that love Jesus. And our unity is not found in a combined Easter service or work day. It's found in our words and our actions. So one of the things North Coast started doing years and years ago is we bless the church plants all around us, and we bless the churches that are across the street. In fact, we helped one of our churches in my tribe that's got a different bend. It's more part of Acts 29 and the Free Church that we are. And I do a lot of stuff with Acts 29, but that's not our tribe, if you will. So they're reaching different people with a slightly different angle. We help them find a campus across the street from our Carl's Bay campus. We introduced them to the realtor. We showed them how to build out the building. We gave them stuff. I mentor that guy because he's not a threat. He's an elective Sunday school class in God's Great Kingdom in North County. And if we will start thinking that way now, guess what will happen when your church grows old? You'll give the building away. But if you don't start now working across the street, you just are kingdom and far away and everything's a threat, you'll never do it. Because it's kind of like if you don't start tithing now, you're not going to tithe when you win the lottery. Start now. So my encouragement to all of you is I hope your missional stuff isn't only for lost people and isn't only for churches far away. It's for churches across the street that lift up the name of Jesus and maybe see a theological thing different than you do. But I bet all of us in this room have changed our minds sometime. Maybe they'll get it right later. So I think that's one of the more profound things we have to do. Plus, the other thing I see coming out of COVID, and I just recorded a talk for, it's called Future Forward. And I said, we're all worried about how we come out of COVID, what we're going to do and all that. And I said, there's two huge elephants that are already in the room. And the one is the echo chamber. And nobody's talking about how we're going to do ministry in light of it. We just complain about it. And the second thing is we've moved from being privileged to tolerated to marginalized to kicked out. And that's not shifting in our culture. Unless there's a revival. But once the spokesman of the culture, for us, read that as media, the artist of the culture, okay, read that as, from music to cinema, and the educational structures, once they align in agreement on anything, it's over. That is where the culture will go. You can find it in history, you can find it in American history. Once those three things align, boom. It's done. And they have all aligned to believe that biblical teaching has a stream of hate speech in it. Right? And what are you doing now to say that's a new reality? Instead of griping about the fact we might lose tax privilege or a housing allowance or not be able to build where we want to build, it's only going to get more. So we need to embrace it. God didn't put us here by accident. It's like, wow, he trusted us with this. Let's go for it. So those are some things I see. Sorry, my answers are so short.
So, Larry,
Yeah.
I think part of what's also happening in church culture is that we're finding people who are moving into ministry who haven't necessarily embraced a shepherd's heart. So, as you're hiring, as you're interviewing, what are the things you look for that then say, okay, I'm talking to a shepherd right now?
Yeah, well, first of all, we all have mixed motives, right? Most of you guys, how many of you know who Chris Brown is? Not North Coast Chris Brown, I mean. Okay, he's going to be one of your speakers, best narrative communicator in the country, just a phenomenally gifted guy. 2 years ago, I stepped back from being lead pastor, so I'm two, he's lead pastor now. And he's got this one talk, I hope I don't preempt it, he doesn't give it, but it's on David, and he points out that David and Goliath, he goes, wow, you know, if I kill this guy, I get money, I get a chick, and he asks, I think it's 3 times in that passage. Now what does the guy get? And then he's like, let's go for it. I always heard in Sunday school, like, this guy had this big heart for God. No, he had a heart for some other things. And so we all have some mixed motives. You see somebody up on a stage, you go, wow, wouldn't that be cool, or whatever. But here's where, Lynn, I think they're refined, is first of all, we love to hire from within whenever possible. I'd always rather hire a B+ within than I know than an A resume, because A resumes lie. And you're going to get about a 50% hit rate if you do really, really, really well. And then we're never wrong, because we've seen the character. The shepherd's heart, though, that I look for is I love to listen to how they talk about the last place they were and how willing they were to be in a servant role. Because I don't want to hire somebody and say, by the way, I'm going to punish you for a little while just to see if you've got it. Kind of Christian boot camp. Welcome to North Coast. We're going to treat you like trash to see if you got a servant's heart. It's like, I don't want to do that. But one of the windows, Lynn, that is very much how they talk about where they were, which always had some problem. There's a reason they're leaving, right? And kind of do they have a pattern of some place where it wasn't done their way and they were a good, loyal soldier? Because you'll never be a good king unless you learn to be a David serving a Saul. That's just always part of the process. So, and then a marriage is incredibly important. Whether we're hiring a woman or a man, we look at that marriage, the health of it. And does that woman feel well loved, and does that man feel well respected? Because if they don't, that's the most important relationship they're in, and they're failing at that one, they're probably not going to do very well at the relationships in church. So I would add that marriage piece. By the way, this is for free, all of you who do hire. One of the things we've learned is we always have 3 trips, complete trips, not 3 different interviews where you stay in a hotel. 3 different times you come. Because the first time, everybody's on their best behavior. The second time, they think it's going really good. The third time, they think they have the job. And I can't tell you how many people on the 3rd trip lost a job because we didn't really know who they were until they thought they had it. And then the hair kind of is let down, and it's like, So that's just been a very practical thing. We'll literally fly you across the country 3 times so that you think you're coming to your 3rd one. So that's a dirty little trick. I shouldn't have recorded it. Some of you are going to apply someday for North Coast Church and go, I got this one all figured out. We'll make you do 4. Anything else? It's hard to see with the lights.
Larry,
Okay.
let's thank him. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. Are we shaking? Are we shaking? Yeah, okay. Oh, we're hugging. All right, good. Oh, good. I'm a hugger. Hey, well, that's all we got for you today. Can we thank Mission Community Church as well? Yeah, thanks for joining us. Be sure to continue to follow us on social media. Tag any of your posts today or things that you shared. Tag us in that and watch your email and social media for our next gathering, which will probably be in January sometime, somewhere, depending on how flu season goes, right? All right. Hey, so thanks. Good to see you.